Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Daki, and I thank you for coming and clicking on these videos and watching these series. I very much appreciate it. I absolutely love making these. So guys, we are back with Daki Time episode 4, and I'm really excited. This thing is still going on a month later. So I do not have a special guest on today. It is just simply me conversing with you guys. I really actually just like sitting down and talking. So I do, however, have a nice question from Macronus, who was on the last episode of Daki Time. So if you have not watched that episode, that question that we answered in episode 3 was super cool, guys. I would advise you guys going and watching that and listening to it and, sharing your opinion on the matter as well. But this time, guys, we have a new question, and the question comes from Macronus. So we're just going to dive straight into this. This won't take too long. And Macronus's question is, would you like to see a normal or heroic raid race come back as an esports event? There were some back in the previous expansions, and the last one we saw was in Siege of Orgrimmar, Method versus Midwinter, and do you think that it would be more popular than the MDI, or the Mythic Dungeon Invitationals? There is a few points on this question that I would like to answer, and first and foremost, the question being, would I like to see it? Yes, I would like to see something like this. There's a few reasons why I do, and a few reasons why I'm a bit sort of cautious on saying this, and quite frankly, I would love to sit down and watch a raid tournament basically on a certain level, a certain raid. I would probably say like the last raid of the expansion or something would sound really cool rather than doing everyone. But would I like to see it? Yeah, absolutely. Would I like to see it come back as an esports event similar to the MDIs? Yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping us from sort of creating an event like that. I mean, absolutely, Blizzard could sit down and structure something very similar to the MDI, but just have it raid race. However, with saying that, there would need to be, if you were to do it as an esports event, some rules around who can participate and what can be classed as a participation. So what I mean by this is that you would have to cap the amount of players per raid, you would have to cap the item level, you would have to implement rules such as whatever buffs, potions, scrolls, whatever you can use in a normal raid environment would have to translate into this tournament. You would also have to implement rules that once you are locked into this raid, you are in that raid, you can't swap in or swap out with players or another teammate or another guildmate, say, and you would have to find a structure. So the structure would be something like the MDI tournament structure, or would it be guild versus guild, and those two guilds go head to head, and bob, there's your winner sort of thing. I think that it would not be a huge stone's throw away from taking the MDI structure and just rolling it across to a heroic or a normal raid race. I would say a heroic raid race would sound better than a normal, as normal would be kind of too easy to clear, and the item level would have to be dropped quite significantly for it to be challenging, basically. I guess moving forward, would it be something like a mythic raid race? You got to understand, Mythic is sort of like the pinnacle of raiders, basically. It is a small handful of raiders that go through and compete at, well, quite literally, the cutting edge of raiding. So question number 1, would you have it at normal, heroic, or mythic? And my answer to this would be probably heroic. It is the most accessible, it is the one they can balance the item levels around quite okay, and you've got enough mechanics with each boss and trash packs, mind you, to deal with this. So yes, there's a lot to talk about in regards to that, but do I believe that it would work? Would I like to see that? The answer to both those questions is yes, actually, I would love to see that. Moving on to answer the question, or answer part of the question, do you think that it would be more popular than the MDI? I don't think that it should be a question of what is more popular, the MDI or a raid race. I think both should be as popular as each other, and they should be considered to be their own sort of spice, I guess you could say. The MDI is obviously that dungeon environment, the raid environment is the raid environment, but this is where it becomes a bit of a grey area for me. The problem with Season 1 MDI is meta builds, and I have had this thing with meta builds. I don't like meta builds. I understand the reason for them, I understand the reason around them, but when you go back and you watch every single episode or every single dungeon of the MDI Season 1, I can guarantee you the majority of groups, not all of them, there were some diversity there, the majority of groups had a Blood Death Knight tank, 1 to 2 rogues, a paladin healer, and probably a DH or something else. you got to understand there were no shadow priests. There was very little sort of feral druids. There was all this. And the reason for that is simply balancing and who comes out ahead on a dungeon environment. You got to understand rogues were the best damage class in a mythic environment because of the way they can build their damage, the utility to get around mobs and navigate the dungeon. So balancing has to be very, very key in the MDI. Here's the thing with raid environment though, is that you don't necessarily have to have a meta. Sure, some metas might even come up and then it would get boring. Like the reason why I'm saying this is because when you watch the whole season 1 MDI, every single race basically, every single dungeon, it was so similar. Every single group skipped almost every single the same pack. Every single group used almost the same characters and specs, that it was like you were watching 20 different teams run the same class and spec and combination, and it got boring. It became the same thing. Hey, they skipped this pack on Dark Heart Thicket, they skipped the bear, and then they went straight to the boss. Every single pack, every single group did that, bar only a few. So when you translate that structure into a raid race environment, it becomes less boring because you've got 20 to 25 people, even you could even make it 30 people if you really wanted to. You've got such a large group of people that sure, metas would develop, but there's a less chance of that happening, and you have diversity. So you can sit there and watch your favorite shadow priest from that favorite guild compete against in a raid race tournament. So you see what I'm saying here, guys. You see that, yes, it can become more popular. I don't think it should be a question of what's more popular, but it could become more popular. I think it's a great idea. Macronus, I think that your question is a fantastic question, and I think it's a great idea. Do I think, moving on from the question a bit here, do I think that they would implement it? And the answer to that is most likely not. They're so invested in the MDI and structuring tournaments around that. They're so sort of invested in the PvP arena seasons and such. I don't think Blizzard would implement it, to be honest. Not saying that's a bad idea, I just don't think it would ever happen again. But I hope that has answered your question. I hope that my point of view has come across. It's not a direct answer, because there could be so many different corresponding answers to this, and so many things you would have to button down to make it work extremely well and enjoyable to watch. I mean, you got to understand that if you want to do a complete raid race from boss 1 to boss 9 or 10 or whatever the bosses be, if you wanted to have a raid race, like a proper race, then it would take hours to implement and watch and yeah, you know, or you could do it the structure like the old school structure where they would pick out 2 or 3 bosses. They're the 2 or 3 bosses you do. You only do the bosses, you don't do the trash. Who knows? There's so many ways you could do this. But anyway, that is enough talking. That is basically the question from Macronus. Macronus, thank you so much for the question. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want a question answered on Daki Time or a topic to talk about, you need to go to my Discord page. You need to go to the requests tab. You need to enter in @Daki Time and answer, or ask a question or put a topic there. That way I know what you guys want to hear and what you guys might want answered, and I can talk about that in the next episode of Daki Time. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. These are only meant to be sort of short and sweet. I think I've rambled on for a good 10 minutes here. But until next time, everyone, have a great day.